Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Radio Week panel. It's all about running a lean radio business, cutting costs without compromising quality, and it's supported by WorldCast. And with me in the studios today are each of our collective studios: Chris Tame from News TV in the UK, Christophe Poulin from WorldCast, and Quentin Howard from, let's say, Boom Radio. So many to choose from, Quentin. And I'm Dr. Laurie Hallett, and although I teach radio, I play with DAB in my spare time. Let's start, if I may, with Christophe, because I think you were the one that came up with the idea for this panel originally, because of the issues around running radio services economically. What's your role in this, and how important has that become, particularly over recent months and years?
Well, you're right, Laurie. Cutting costs without compromising quality has been one of our, I would say, main objectives over the last couple of years. And to be honest, yes, over the last year, with inflation, we see coming with the components, electronic components, with the war in Ukraine and the inflation with the energy. It's now a critical for our customers. So basically, two objectives we're working on: trying to deal with sourcing. As I said, components, electronic components have increased, and the lead time has also increased. So we basically, what do? We try to develop more software features instead of hardware. So if you look at a transmitter nowadays, you've got a lot of built-in features to avoid adding racks together. So it does improve the lead time. It does lower the cost also for our customers. And the second topic related to the energy, the inflation and the cost of the energy is booming. In some countries, it is actually ridiculous, actually, I would say. And we've been working on a technology enabling our transmitter to decrease basically the consumption of the electricity up to 40%, which is huge. So this is the main topics, of course, we're working on, and with still the objective of the audio quality at the end. Let's put it this way: radio, the audio and the quality is critical. So we don't want to decrease the quality. That's essential.
Out of curiosity, Christophe, as a manufacturer, you talk about the issues around availability of components. Is that something that's gradually improving as we move away from the COVID times, or is it something that you just don't see an endpoint of at the moment?
Honestly, it looks like the situation is getting better. That's the last information I got from our sourcing department, purchasing manager, production. It looks like the situation does improve, and maybe finally, we see the end of the tunnel, the light, I would say. So we are optimistic that next year will be better. Are we going to see pricing decreasing? This I cannot tell, but it looks like it's getting more stable. So I keep my fingers crossed, because it's true that what we've seen over the last couple of years is very difficult to deal with.
Are there particular things that are really problematic? Things that you think, oh, this is never going to be solved. This is something where we need software to just be the only solution?
Well, it's tricky, because when we decide to design a new hardware platform with having in mind to put more software to kill some rack unit, you need some key components to be powerful enough to support all those new software. So, buying DSP, FPGA with more power is important to us. And those components, they are difficult to source, and we've seen a lot of increase. But even a simple fan, one of the most famous manufacturer in this area, the lead time today is around 1.5 years to get some fans, you see. And we've seen the same increase for metalwork, chassis and stuff like that. So it's not, even the small components, stupid, very low-level components have increased. and it looks like some factories and manufacturer of components. You all know they prefer to put their production and their resources with high value components. So they start stopping manufacturing those basic capacitors or resistance or things like that. So yeah, it's very complex. And we have to deal with that. That's it. So that does explain also sometimes the increase we see with some products in the market. But we try to find some solution to, at the end, by changing a little bit the architecture, putting more software features at the end, for the customer and for the radio, we try to keep the operating cost at the same level or even maybe decrease, I would say.
Thank you. Let's talk about some specific examples with Chris and Quentin. Quentin, if I could start with you first, please. Can you tell us a bit about the projects that you've been involved in over the past couple of years, and specifically how you've solved some of those problems of access to facilities?
So I think Boom Radio is an interesting example of a project that was set up just over 2 years ago. In the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the UK's second lockdown. So that constrained us straight away. We couldn't really go into people's homes and put facilities in because there was complete social distancing. So we had to come up with a radio station which was virtual. We couldn't even think about building racks rooms particularly. And with Boom Radio, what we've ended up with is a radio station where we own almost nothing. It's radio as a service. So the playout system, the trafficking commercial log system, the music selection system, we just rent that by the month from RCS. And they look after all of the hardware, and I've never seen it. In 2 years since we've been doing Boom Radio, I've never seen the hardware we use. The challenges behind it were twofold. One, we had to keep the budget lean because we were a startup radio station, and in the risky phase of broadcasting, you need to keep your costs down. So no extravagance, but we wanted a product which would stand up against any of the other national broadcasters in the UK. So I think the first challenge was how we get the equipment into the broadcaster studios. Now all our presenters are old age pensioners, because our radio station is targeted at baby boomers who were born from between 1946 and 1964. So they're all well over 60 now. And most of them did not have broadcast equipment. They've all been broadcasters, but they've tended to work for the BBC or commercial radio, and they've gone into traditional studios. So in many cases, we were setting them up for the first time with the ability to broadcast from home. Now, one of the great things about the pandemic, if you can call it a great thing, is we all learned very quickly in this business how to do remote broadcasting. And I simply tagged on the back of that to identify what we could do with the minimum of risk to the systems. So for example, we set up presenters with a USB microphone and a pair of headphones, and either their own laptop or we provided a PC for them. That was it. The main thing that's held the cost down for Boom Radio is the fact that we voice track. Now, voice tracking is one of those kind of what we call in the UK a Marmite thing. You either love it or you hate it. But voice tracking done well is completely indistinguishable from live radio. And we took the view that voice tracking was perfectly capable of presenting radio links, the whole radio program, as if it was live. And that's exactly what we've done. It's not cheap radio, as some people, it's not cheap VTing, it's not boring VT, it's not 5 in a row and 1 VT. We presented as a completely normal, every other record or every record is back announced, and the presenters talk in the way they would as if they were live. From a technical point of view, that has a major factor on the cost, is that I do not need to put in resilient systems in the broadcaster's home. I've got time. It buys me time to fix a problem if something goes wrong with the computer or something goes wrong with their broadband connection or any myriad of other things that we all know can go wrong. And it's that time factor that changes completely the economics of doing radio. So we have presenters at home. They had to be able to install their own microphones. We have to be able to triage it by phone in case the connection's gone down. And those are quite subtle things about how you manage a radio station. Bear in mind, we're dealing with people who aren't necessarily computer savvy. So this idea of triage by phone, everything I sent out has labels attached, plug in here, USB 1, USB 2, and keep it as simple as possible. And by and large, that strategy has worked for us. When we send out computers, they're pre-configured here, they're all configured to the same format, they've all got the same desktop, and every single button that you need on the computer is labelled. I'm a Dymo label freak, I'm afraid, but even the on-off button, because when you're in a panic, you don't see the obvious. So a lot of lessons were learned in setting up Boom Radio, but the overall economics of it has even surprised me. And I've spent nearly 50 years in commercial radio, where everything is done on the smell of an oil rag, and even the economics of this have surprised me. How low cost you can make a radio station, which is reliable, it's backed up, it's got disaster recovery systems. And the presenters all present from home. So, even at my ripe old age, it's been a real education as to how to do it.
How much is that success down to the technology, and how much down to the fact that you are working with a lot of professionals with a good deal of experience under their belts?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the technology, is mature now. I don't think it was before the pandemic, but I think the technology of remote voice tracking is pretty mature now. Not without its bugs. You talk to any vendor, they've all got their little foibles. So the technology is good. I mean, I'm using one of our standard microphones, which is the RODECaster, the Rode NT USB. That's our go-to mic for all our presenters. And when you look at the cost of that, £150, €180, it's nothing for the quality that you're getting. But a big part of it, you're right, Laurie, is that we're working with seasoned presenters, seasoned management. Everybody who runs Boom Radio, who's involved in Boom Radio, has been doing this. We totted up the total years of experience of all our presenters. It's over 1,000 years of experience in radio. We totted up their heights as well. It doesn't come to very much because we're all quite small. But that's also quite important because everybody trusts each other implicitly. You don't have there's no drama queens in this. It's just people get on with their job. They know how to do it, and they cope with. As long as I give them the confidence that we'll fix the problems, they cope with it really, really well. I've got to say, it's the happiest radio station I've ever worked on. Wonderful. I recommend it. Just employ retired people. They don't care.
Actually, just one particular question, because it's caused problems for other broadcasts I'm aware of, and that is, you can get all the technology right at the presenters, you can have all the back end systems, but that link between when it's coming over if you like, a domestic ADSL line or some sort of broadband connection, how much of that is problematic for you, and how do you get round it?
It's oddly enough, it's less problematic than I thought it would be. I think we've had the usual number of incidents where something hasn't happened, but what we've been able to do is where we've got presenters who've got you always have unreliable systems. There's always something. We've put in backup systems for them, so we'll send them a little Wi-Fi hotspot, and that's their backup system. And as long as I can talk them over the phone how to use it, we're in business again. I think we had a good example of a sort of major catastrophe we had was David Hamilton, who it broadcasts from a farm in the middle of Sussex. He has fibre to his home, remarkably. But the farmer next door ploughed it up and broke the fibre. And David VTs his programme quite close to transmission a couple of hours before. So he called me up and he said, look, something's gone wrong. I don't know how we can fix this. And what we did was he drove to one of our colleagues' houses about 30 miles away, who happened to have a mic. He wasn't a broadcaster, but he was somebody we've used to help set up the engineering. He had a mic, he had a computer, and he broadcast from there. So we got him back on air without really losing anything at all. And I think it's that buffer of time that you've got to make some decisions. And if the worst come to the worst, we'll put a different presenter in. But I can't think of an occasion in the 2 years we've been broadcasting where we've had to do that, which in itself, is remarkable. But everybody's connection is different, and we've had quite a few challenges getting presenters connected. Judy Spires, who lives in Devon, she's tail end of broadband. It was 1 meg down and half a meg up on a good day when it wasn't raining, and no 3G or 4G coverage. What we found in Exeter was there was a local broadband provider who provided essentially WiMAX, and we were able to get a connection to a house that way. Les Ross in Birmingham, he's in a broadband black spot, but we've got him connected. He connects via 4G. So we have every variety of connection possible, and we just make sure that it's reliable, and we've got a bit of time to fix it. That's the thing, time.
Thank you, Quentin. I'm sure we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. And I might, without breaking any commercial confidences, I might ask you a bit more about the costs of the individual presenters and your back end costs, sure. Because that's really what we're about today, about looking at the costs. But I'd like to move, if I may, to Chris Tame. And Chris, your situation is a little bit different because you weren't building something from scratch, were you? Your project was much more about integrating something into an existing product.
It was, yeah. So the most recent project of ours was TalkTV, which is a visual offshoot of Talk Radio. We've done a little bit of visualization in the past on OTT platforms like YouTube, Twitter, those sorts of things, but we'd never done it, I would say, properly, and certainly not on linear platforms like Sky or Freeview, Freesat. We already had a studio, we already had presenters, we had microphones, but we didn't have kind of the core backbone that was required for getting that to air. So the remit from the start was always trying to achieve this economically. It was kind of a trial at first. We wasn't wanting to pile millions at it where possible. And we quickly worked out that we already had a lot of the things we needed. We just needed to unlock a little bit of the automation behind it. So we were already playing radio adverts. We already had a play out system. We already had someone running the audio for that studio. We had someone who was getting the callers and the guests at the time, just for phone guests and audio guests. But we're using those same people now to get visualized guests on from things like Mac Minis, so Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, those sorts of things. And we've managed to run our daytime production with 4 people, and one of them is a producer. And a lot of what happens when it comes to advert breaks, when it comes to switching to news bulletins, it all originates from the technical operator, who's also running the audio, hitting go. And from there, we're spitting out macros left, right, and center that switches our visualization system to go to an ad break. It sends SCUTty markers to our transmission partners at Encompass to play adverts on linear platforms and OTT platforms. And we've managed to keep it a really lean operation. Actually, no more people than there was when it was just radio, but we are on TV. There's definitely been a few learning curves, and having to get things like timing working was incredibly frustrating. Having everything match up so you can all go off and do whatever you want for 3 minutes and 6, but you've all got to come back at the same time. For whatever reason, that took us such a long time. And you have to wait till every ad break to go, oh, no, it wasn't right again. Let's try again. But it was incredibly fun. It was really interesting, challenging in a good way. And yeah, we've had a lot of fun doing so.
In your organisation, of course, you've got people whose background is in TV. So what do they think of this, of the approach of this project?
I think it's by no means traditional. It's everything but. And I think a lot of people felt it just wasn't proper. the long and short of it is no, it's not. You can't run this with this fewer people. You can't run this with, not a second TD, not a PA, not someone doing this, someone doing that. I think we've definitely changed a lot of people's opinions in what can be done. As Quincy might have touched on, radio, especially commercial radio, is in its DNA is a lean operation. You haven't got the luxury of 20 people in a gallery. You've got a bottom line to work to, and we had to bear that in mind throughout, really. And although we do have more traditional TV studios downstairs, I think we get quite close to the quality of output when there's a gallery of 20 people with a gallery of 4 people and one presenter. So I think people were very apprehensive at first, but we've definitely changed some hearts and minds for sure.
And do you think that will impact on the TV operations? That sort of the learning curve and the different economic pressures. TV has always kind of had the luxury of a little more cash floating around than radio. Are people now going away and think, oh, actually we could learn from this and it would have benefits elsewhere in the organisation?
I think TV is a very big, slow-moving beast. It's a big ship, and I think it will take a while for any of this to ripple down. But you can see examples of this throughout the industry as technology has progressed. A lot of kind of tier 1 sports and esports, they're sending cameras and kits to a location, and as long as they've got internet there, a good internet connection, and an engineer there to just make sure it's all connected, all of the staff actually driving the show can stay in the UK or where that company is based, it's a fantastic development, and it's something we've tried to do with some of our outside broadcasts as well. Is not sending all the people we can there, is having some remote control back at base, and that saves on everything from travel. It means you're sitting where you're comfortable. You've got everything you need from there. So I think it's definitely something that could trickle down. We're kind of proving a fact that it can happen. A recent example of this is we're currently rebuilding a lot of our TV studios downstairs to bring some of our hosts in from an external studio, and temporarily, I think I can say this. Temporarily, we've had to set up our news bulletins that come out of a meeting room. It took us about a week or so because that's all the time we had, and it's gone from a team of 4 or 5 people down to a newsreader and one person who's driving everything from the play out of tape, sound on tape, the underlays, and looking after the levels, because a lot of the actual switching is taking place from our studio systems in the radio studio, because there's already someone sitting there. So it seems obvious to us to just, let's bolt another command onto it. So that person is sitting there, making sure that levels are correct. But everything from the auto script, which is following the newsreader's voice, she's not clicking it, she's not scrolling it, it's listening to her voice and it's scrolling down. All of the videos are automated. We've managed to thin it down to just 2 people, and if you look from behind the camera, quite a simple setup. But the actual production on screen, I think, is at least 9/10. So the quality to cost ratio, we've definitely put a massive dent in it, and I think we're still producing stuff that stands up to the rest of the big guys.
Thanks. On the subject of costs, you're adding on effectively visual elements to radio without breaking commercial confidences. In percentage terms, what's the add-on cost to your baseline audio production when you're adding in the visual elements?
I think with these, the only extra costs for us have been the transmission costs involved in TV. The actual getting it onto those platforms, the linear platforms like Sky, working with the external partners such as Encompass. That was never something we needed to have before, but having those other companies tied in, I would say that's probably the largest cost. The actual cost of people, when we're running outside of prime time, there's only really 2 more people than there was when it was just radio, but we're also TV on 7 different platforms globally. So it's been extremely lean and quite affordable in the big scheme of things. It hasn't cost that much extra at all. The transmission costs have been extra, but in terms of the in-house costs, it's yeah, I'd say still a lot cheaper than some other commercial radio stations would run without telly.
Thank you. Can I bring Christoph back in here, if I may? Christoph, you've got a very wide range of clients at WorldCast. When you hear examples like that from Quentin and from Chris, how does that match up with the experience of your clients? And what has your involvement in WorldCast been of particular projects, if you can mention any of them?
Well, what I see listening to Chris and Quentin is actually we can cut costs, and at the same time we're not talking about compromising the quality, but I think we can actually improve the quality. That's something else, you know. Here we're talking about without compromising. What I realize and what we've been doing with many customers is trying to find solution to at the same time lower the operating cost, but trying to find some solution as well to improve the audio quality. You know, what is the purpose of you know, having a digital console at the studio, investing a lot of money in sound processor, very expensive, but at the same time using a bad antenna or an analog exciter at the end? Why would be digital at the beginning and analog at the end when you can now, with the technology, deliver the signal right after the microphone, convert to digital, and all the way down to the transmitter be digital without having all those analog to digital conversion, etc. So that's what we are working with our customer to basically answer their concern about improving the quality and also lowering the cost. What we, as an example, what is the biggest example I would say lately is in Germany with a large network operator broadcasting a lot of commercial and public radio station. One of their main topic is the energy saving and the CO2 savings, not only for them but for their clients, because they have some commitment, I would say. Before the crisis, I would say the energy in Germany was already very high, but it has increased a lot, of course, just like everywhere. And they've been the early adopter of our technology, SmartFM, basically enabling to, in real time, if we look at the transmitter itself, analyze the content and in real time modulate the power level. And that's the beauty of the technology. Instead of running a transmitter at nominal power for 10 years, we keep modulating the power based on the content without of course, modifying the listener experience, especially at the edge of the coverage. And by doing that, they've been able to lower the CO2 emissions, important, and they've been able to lower their invoice for the electricity around 20 to 25%, which is quite significant. Again, as I was mentioning at the beginning, I've heard about radio stations in some countries turning off the transmitter during the night, to save some money. This is what we're dealing with right now in some countries. This is very bad for our industry. So we need to find some solution to help them dealing with this situation, which is hopefully just for a specific period of time. I hope it will be better soon.
Can you tell me a bit more about SmartFM? I assume by the name that it refers to FM transmitters.
Absolutely, yeah.
That would be a wild guess. But is it something that is retrofitted to existing equipment, or is it something which is where a piece of WorldCast equipment goes in that replaces something else?
No, I would say any of our customers who actually purchased a transmitter over the last 10 years can implement this technology. It is specific to a WorldCast transmitter because the design itself of the transmitter must support this technology, where we have to deal with the management of the power supply and the amplifier. I don't want to detail, the RF stuff, but you need the transmitter to be very fast, to change the power, not too fast, in order to avoid generating what we call AM noise, which is another issue. But that's the beauty of the FM, which is still, as you know, analog. In the FM signal, there's always some noise. That's it. And most of the time, the noise is being actually hidden by the modulation itself, by the content. So, of course, if you're listening to classical music, very fragile, very low level, we're not going to move a lot the power level because this might impact the coverage. But, depending on the content, talk show, music, with also the effect of the sound processor and the loudness, you can actually decrease the power, again, in real time, and you do not notice it. So that's basically how it works to make it simple.
Give me an idea, if you can, Christophe. If I'm an operator of an FM radio station and I'm thinking of re-equipping, you're saying it's 25% roughly average, yeah, an approximate figure for the. So I'm just wondering how many years you would when would you be in profit by buying the new equipment?
I'm going to give you a very concrete example. We've been testing with a local radio station here in Bordeaux last week. Bordeaux, France, and they're running a 2 kilowatt transmitter at nominal power, and it looks like they pay the electricity around 35 cents, I would say, with their content, and it's a radio station with music, I would say. They can save per year around 2,800 euro per year. Okay. So the cost of a 2 kilowatt transmitter, how much is that? Street price, it depends of the brand, but I would say it's around 6,000, 7,000 euro street price. So you do the math. If you replace your transmitter, after a couple of years, that's it. It's paid. And again, the good thing also is you lower the CO2 emission, which is something, let's not forget that, because, okay, right now the topic is how can we save some money with the electricity. That's really a challenge for a lot of us personally on the business side. But let's also keep thinking about the CO2 emission, which is also a big challenge where we need to deal with, so that's the two benefits of doing that.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to Quentin, if I may, Quentin, just thinking about what I asked earlier on. I said I might come back and ask you about costs, because one of the interesting things about this is that, the cost of starting a radio station probably over the last 20 years have progressively fallen. That's not to say that transmission costs have necessarily fallen, but actually the infrastructure costs have gone down. You've added in the extra complexity of remote working and what have you. Just give me an overview of the economics, if you can.
Okay, so the kit we send to presenters, a pair of headphones, a microphone and a stand, that's £250. If we provide them with a computer, I give them a second-hand computer, which is 300 quid. An i7 with enough memory and so on. Doesn't need to be brand new because it's a single-purpose computer and a screen. So I can set a presenter up for £500 if they have no kit of their own. Some of them have some kit of their own, so it's even less. I say we own nothing. In terms of the hardware for playout, that's rented from RCS, Radio as a Service, and so my total capital budget for Boom Radio for the first year was £12,000, and we've set up a national radio station for that. Now, I could have bought kit, and since then we have bought equipment and DR systems and so on. But the important thing about establishing a radio station is that you need to focus the money where it matters. So yes, transmission, streaming costs, all of those sorts of things, they are taking money out from the bottom line straight away. But it did mean, without having to invest in lots of studio infrastructure and sound absorption and all those sort of stuff, we could focus on putting money into sales. And that then is the key to the growth of the station. I think that's where a lot of startup stations probably make the mistake. They don't focus enough on the investment in sales. But with the pedigree of the people setting up Boom Radio, it will be no surprise to anybody, but that's where the focus was. and it's paying off. I mean, the station is doing exceptionally well, and the response from the audience, which at the end of the day is the acid test, has been remarkable, as you saw from the latest radar results. I mean, we couldn't be happier. So by not investing in studios, not investing in racks rooms, not having to pay out for engineers, to go and manage all of that, suddenly all your costs just collapse, and it changes the dynamics, changes the equation completely.
I've got a question which coming in from a viewer, Daniel Slentz. Hello, Daniel. And he's asking you, Quentin, you're always voice tracking programs at the moment. If you wanted to do a live show, can you do that?
Yes, we could. The RCS Zeta system does have the ability to go live. We've never felt the need to use it. There is always a temptation. But let me give you an example of if you manage your voice tracking well. I'll give you two examples of what we do. So typically, our presenters will record a couple of hours in advance, but possibly a day in advance. There's one particular weekend presenter I'm thinking of. He records a day in advance, but he leaves two of the voice track slots empty. And about an hour before the show goes live, he pops in a newspaper review of the day and something else that's highly contemporary. The other example I would give is how quickly we were able to respond when Prince Philip died. And for radio stations and TV stations, that's the big moment, getting the news out. We were the first music radio station in the UK to broadcast the news of Prince Philip passing away. And we did that because we were ready with everything to go, and we popped in the voice track and it got broadcast 60 seconds later. So there's no reason why voice tracking need not be as close to live as possible. And I'm always amused by people who say it should be live, it must be done now, it's absolutely essential. Nothing's live. DAB's 3 seconds behind real time. Streaming is at least 30 seconds behind real time. So you tell me what the definition of live really is.
I'll pass on that question. I don't feel competent to answer it. Beyond saying, of course, that for some people, particularly for less experienced broadcasters, sometimes the adrenaline can be a great focus on the mind because they know it's live. But I think that's when you've got very experienced presenters like yours. I'm not sure that
I think that's true, and that's one of the things with voice tracking that is a change of mindset. It is about, and particularly the type of voice tracking we do on Boom Radio. It is the presenters, and I do a show on Boom Radio, and it was tough for me to get my head around voice tracking as if it's live. There is an art to it, and it's a different art from pre-recording a show, and it's a different art from the VTing where you're going 5 in a row. This is, and the name of the station name checked. A formulaic radio. It's very different. But once you get into it, the experience presents just as if it's live, and the vast majority of our listeners have no idea that we're not live.
Well, I have a confession for you, Quentin. When I first listened when the station launched, I had not realised that it was voice tracked, and it took me a long while to realise that was the case.
Well, that's the acid test.
So exactly, the acid test. Chris, how much has the change of bringing in the VT elements, the video elements to your service, changed the behaviour and the activities of the baseline radio service?
Well, I think it's made us a bit tighter. I think it's made us consider more. I think we have to think of a lot more when it comes to getting a guest on. It takes a bit quicker takes a bit longer to get them set up. Getting an audio guest to air, it takes no time at all, and it doesn't matter what they're wearing, if anything at all, or where they are, what it looks like. And that was also sort of true when we were kind of just doing it on OTT platforms, that if it looked a bit naff, it was okay. And I think at the start of COVID, there was a lot of interviews that were just, someone's chin pointing at their, from their phone. And we've tried really hard to avoid that. So we have to be more considered and plan a bit more in advance with our guests. And one of the roles of the people in the studio, one of their many roles, is just QCing all of our guests before they go to air. Having a quick look at them. Now, could you sit to the right a bit? Can you put your laptop up a little bit? Can you count to 10 for me? So we've had to be a bit more considered because once you're on proper telly, it just won't do. It needs to be of a certain grade and standard. So I think it's definitely made people raise their game and put a lot more thought into the quality of what we put out when it comes to the visuals. We were already quite tight when it comes to radio, I'd like to think. And there's certain standards when it comes to what audio levels should be on either platform, and we've got that down to quite a fine art now. I think it's made everyone sharpen up a bit, to be honest. And I think everyone felt a bit more pressure at first. I think you can get quite relaxed in radio because no one can see you. You know, they can't see the wires or the mayhem that might be, you know, the other side of the mic. But when we were on TV, we thought, oh, actually, we should probably, you know, be a bit smarter here and make it look a bit more professional. But yeah, I think it's tightened everyone up and made us all sit up a bit straighter. But I think ultimately that's made us all better at our jobs.
I'd echo that. I think the other thing it's done, you see this in lots of visualized radio studios now, it's changed the way the microphones are set up. You no longer have these things hanging down.
Yeah.
You know, they're nicely arranged with a little logo on the top, and it's a great opportunity for branding. But then the whole layout of the studio, instead of being, you know, the traditional stacked up CD players and racks all around you and this little kind of cave that we used to broadcast from, they're now flat and they're visually very appealing. And I think that's changed also the way that some of the presentation goes, some of the way the presenters respond.
Yeah.
And I think it's been refreshing. I wish that more of, particularly people who are on the media a lot, I wish they take a little bit of advice about how to frame up a camera and how to get a bit of lighting. It's not difficult, but I'm amazed how many nose cameras are live on telly. And maybe there's a business to be had for people to consult.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's we had it a lot with our presenters as well, especially during COVID when we first started broadcast. We had a lot of hesitance from our presenters not wanting to be on camera. Some of them just flat out refused to. I didn't want to. And then when we finally did convince them, they'd spend the entire show just looking down at their lap, going through their notes. You know, you'd see them on their phone, and you go, no, you're on camera. Please, please look at the camera.
And these things too. You know, these are in use a
Absolutely.
lot now as monitoring headphones instead of the big old cams.
Yeah, we've actually gone to lav mics on TalkTV in the radio studio now, which you can't beat a large diaphragm condenser when it comes to radio sound. And that was a business decision. They wanted to try it. Initially, we were, you know, really trying to push the radio on the tellies. We liked that kind of authentic big microphone there with the branding on it and the big DT109s, 150s rather. But we're becoming more and more telly in that respect, I suppose. And I think everyone is starting to settle into it, and we're treating it more and more every day as proper telly, I'd say.
Okay, I think there's a couple of questions coming in, but whilst I'm waiting for them, can we have some confession time, particularly from Chris and from Quentin? What went horribly wrong that you weren't expecting, and how did you solve it? I'm sure there must be something.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We haven't got time for all of them. Do you want to start, Quentin?
Well, yes, this is confessions of an engineer. I think the thing that keeps me up most is essentially the fragility of the entire transmission chain now, particularly with the internet. Yesterday, I noticed our streaming in the afternoon was stepping down oddly, and that's usually a sign that something's disconnected. But it wasn't the normal kind of stepping you see when there's a hardware fault. Turned out that Virgin have been having a lot of problems with their core network these last few days, and it's disconnecting swathes of listeners. And it wasn't just us; it happened to everybody. And that's the frustration: is that we're no longer in control of the end-to-end transmission, particularly when it deals with the internet. And that's the thing I lose most sleep over. And there's nothing you can do. And the listener just think it's your fault. They always think it's your fault, and that's it. So it's not a confession as such; it's a frustration.
Thank you. Can I just quickly jump in before was one of the things about this system is the questions come up and then they disappear. Mark Gilman's been in touch and he's asking for you, Quentin, to explain a bit about the Boom Radio app, and he's asking what's the uptake on that versus DAB, And then he's asking you may or may not want to say this: which app provider do you use for your app? Is it a white label provider, or is it? And what are the costs associated with it?
Oh, so that again is our approach to: did we want to build our own website? Did we want to build our own app? No. So we use Air, AIR, who provide essentially a white label website for your radio station that does everything, and they do a white label app. And again, that's it's a monthly fee. It's relatively small, and all the hassle is taken away from us. I think so. That's the answer to that. In terms of the numbers of take up, I think the lesson I've learned, which I didn't know at the time, was when I'm setting up my streams, I need to set up individual streams for each of the platforms, so I can immediately tell how many people are listening via TuneIn, how many are listening via the app, how many are listening via all the different platforms. I didn't do that, so it's a little bit difficult to break it out. But I think I think when I'm looking at as I'm doing now, updating to HLS as our streaming, I'll probably end up doing that, because data is everything. Understanding how many people are using these things immediately tells you how much effort you need to put into making them better, or your priorities.
Thank you, Chris. I'm not going to I'm not going to forget to ask you the same question.
Well, I'm traditionally radio. My background is predominantly radio, and there's certain things that you just haven't got to worry about, like black and burst or buy and try level sync. And I wasn't prepared for how fussy some TV kit can get. And we were also, because we were integrating TV and radio into a building that was already radio, and it's an AES 67 building, audio over IP, using Livewire predominantly from Axia. And we introduced a lot of Dante kits when it came to the TV side. And that then converted to Maddie, another TV, or another flavor, more predominantly used with TV. But getting all of them to talk the same time was horrifically hard. And if you don't know, Dante devices, which we used all over our TV gallery, from the audio monitoring units to the audio de-embedders for our VTs, for all sorts of ROSs, if they lose their lock or they're not quite happy with the timing they get, they just go silent for maybe 14 seconds or so. And we were just watching things drop like flies. And one day it might be the director's audio monitoring unit, and he then goes mental because he thinks we're off the air, we've lost timing, everything's horribly wrong. Buzzes through to the sound guy, and he's gone, no, mine's fine, mate, because he's not using that same unit. And we were chasing our tails on this for a long time, and it was kind of down to the wire a little bit. We managed to put a few, I wouldn't call them bodges, but a few converters in place where we may be going a bit between AES to AES 67 to AES 67, but that's fine, right? And it's been reliable ever since. I've since fixed the original issue, going through manuals and menus of our PTP clocks, and we had a similar thing with our frame synchronization on our platforms as well. And it got to 2 days before launch, and I couldn't find a frame synchronizer in the country. I don't think I could find one in Europe that I could get in time, and so managed to use some bits of kit that aren't necessarily frame synchronizers, but kind of achieve the same thing. And they are kind of still in service. I should probably get them out for different ones, really. But we're all friends here, right?
What would we do without the Black Magic catalogue?
They are Black Magic, yes. but they're doing the job, right?
Yeah, Laurie, there is a confession as well about Chrome breaking, which did affect us and affected other vendors of voice tracking systems. Chrome decided to do an update. This was March 2021, and it broke voice tracking. It broke the way that that audio, and it was a nightmare because we were all scrabbling around trying to find a browser that worked, because so many of them are Chrome based. And there's always that sword of Damocles hanging over you that whatever you do, whatever you put in situ, sooner or later, some web engineer is going to break it for you. And we learned some lessons there, and now I have 3 browsers of different makes, different vintages on every presenter's laptop, marked Zeta 1, which is the main one, Emergency 1, and Absolute Emergency.
Fantastic.
So I suppose there's a takeaway, Chris, isn't there, from that, where Quentin has the advantage of you in that Quentin is building something from the ground up. There's no interdependency issues except to interface with your external third parties. But the challenge for you, and possibly the economic on cost, if you will, was that integration. Not just in terms of obviously you've got to spend the money to put the integration in, but then you've got to actually make it talk to each other.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes the options are just taken away from you. Sometimes the path can be quite straight. You think, well, that's impossible. That's not going to happen. And we had a few constraints where we were using an aging video router that was, kind of at capacity before we launched the TV station on it. And so some of the ways we did things, we kind of didn't have an option. We would have done it a different way if we could, but whether it was lead times, budget constraints, we're launching in 2 weeks, those options were taken away from us. So we had to be quite creative in how we approached a lot of these things, putting extra bits of kits on, putting some converters in. We've got quite a few converters talking different languages. And in an ideal world, we wouldn't have those bits in. We'd have everything talking the same language. But I think this is the case for a lot of companies that have been around for a while, because you can't turn the thing off. As much as I keep trying to ask them, if I should turn it all off for a week, we'll be fine. But the bean counters aren't too keen on that idea. So it meant we had to think very creatively on these systems we used, how we implemented them, and crucially making sure we documented every single step of the way, so we know what that box is doing. A Dante to MADI converter of a certain type, and what's going through it. What might we lose if that does go off? And these are things I think in an ideal world we will eventually unpick. But we've all put those temporary ties in, and we mean to take them out in a week's time, and there they are, dusty 2 years later on the Chrome frame.
Well, I will confess that there is a certain DAB radio station running on 4G. Because 8 months after ordering the data line from the well-known internet provider, it still hasn't been delivered, and that was only meant to be there for 3 weeks. So, Christoph, can I bring you back in here, if I may, which is just to ask you if there are any examples from your clients of where they can really see some positive developments from the pressures that they've been put under by both COVID and the more recent issues around the economic situation.
Well, if I may pick up one example, again related to the infrastructure and the technology now available. There's one trend, one topic we currently see more and more is what we call MPX distribution. For some years, radio stations are used to send the audio from the studio to the transmitting site, and usually they put their main audio processor at the transmitting site. Well, if you run a network and if you have 50 transmitting sites across the country, that means you have to buy potentially 50 sound processors. So there's a cost. And what we see now is, again, because you've got the bandwidth now available between the studio and the transmitting site, they put the main audio processor at the studio, and then they deliver the MPX over IP, meaning that they only need one sound processor and they deliver the same signal at the 50 sites. By doing that, well, they can maintain their audio quality, clearly. They stay digital, and at the same time, they can cut a lot of expenses. This is, again, a good example where the technology can help cutting costs, at the same time increasing the quality. So this, the technology plus the skills, the creativity of the engineers can generate very good things to our industry.
Thank you. I think really as we come broadly towards the end of this hour, I'd like to ask all of you, in fact, what advice you would give to someone who is now where you were a couple of years ago. Just reflecting on your experiences, if you had to pass on a piece of advice to someone, what might that be? And I'll just let someone jump in if they'd like to.
Well, I would say, first of all, the wheel has probably already been invented, so have a look. But I'm sure in Chris's case and in my case, I looked a lot at what podcasting people were doing, because there's some really clever, innovative ideas there. The other advice I would have is attention to detail. It's the fine detail that makes all the difference between something that is adequate or flaky and something which is smooth and sounds like $1 million. And I think one of the things that at Boom that I've done is been really particular about attention to detail, making sure that all the presenters' levels are right, making sure that the processing is exactly what I want it to be, making sure that all the interconnectivity and the backup systems do work, and testing them. And watch out for gotchas. One of my gotchas was we started everything at 48K in terms of streaming, but it turned out that we were coming out of the playout system at 44.1, and somewhere along the way a sample rate converter just didn't sound right. So I switched everything to 44.1, and I found it by sending squeak tones. Nobody does that anymore, but I lined everything up and I sent gliding tones, and you can see on a spectrum analyzer really easily when you've got problems like that. And I found that one before we went on air. It surprised me. I didn't expect it, but attention to detail.
Thank you. Chris, I liked your point about documentation, because if there's one thing that drives me nuts when I go into a radio station and ask a question, and the question is, where is your documentation? And they look at you blankly, you know you're in for a busy day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been on both sides of it. I've joined an older company where everything was very well debugged, and everything was there, and it had all died 4 times, and they repaired it with tape, and that was very frustrating. So when we built the new building, for radio at least, I endeavoured to make sure that whoever comes after me has a fighting chance of working out why I did it. And I've always tried to make sure all my transmission chains are linear, how they're built. So yeah, documentation is a big one. I would say, to answer the initial question, I would say keep a cool head, stay calm. Quentin made a good point. Someone's probably done this in a similar way. So there is a way of doing it. There's always a way of doing it. And if you can't think of one, you just haven't found it yet. It's okay. You will find it. I would try and leave a couple of lifelines. Get it to air. If you need to get it to air, get it to air. Don't miss out on brilliance because you're striving for absolute sublime perfection. Sometimes brilliance is okay, especially if it gets you over the line and keeps the shareholders happy. We can get it perfect next week, but just getting things to air as best you can and staying calm. I would say it would be my advice on that.
Right, the 10-second answer, please. Your favourite piece of kit that you've been using over the last couple of years.
Ooh, Pathfinder Core. I'm a big fan of that. Axia Pathfinder Core. It runs all the logic across the entire building, and it can do anything that I make it to.
Quentin, are you going to say the Rode microphone? Because you're obviously very impressed by that.
I would, because I think it's been transformational.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And thank you especially to WorldCast for supporting this session, which I believe will be available online over the next day or so, if not sooner. So Quentin Howard, thank you. Chris Tame, thank you very much. And Christophe Poulin, thank you very much for taking part in this session of the Red Tech Radio Week. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to you.
Thank you.